Right now, you probably have more ways to reach another human being than at any point in history. A device in your pocket, dozens of apps, hundreds of contacts, and yet something feels off. Something feels quietly, persistently wrong. That feeling has a name, and the explanation for it is far stranger than you think. Loneliness is not a feeling. Not really. It is a biological alarm system, one that was installed in your body hundreds of thousands of years before the internet existed, before cities existed, before language existed. And it is going off right now in more people than at any other recorded moment in human history. Here is what the science actually says, and here is why it changes everything. In 2015, a researcher named John Cacioppo published findings that would quietly rewrite how neuroscientists understood the human brain. Cacioppo, a social neuroscientist at the University of Chicago, had spent over 2 decades studying what loneliness does to the body. Not the emotion of loneliness, the biology of it. What he found was not what anyone expected. Your brain, when it detects social isolation, does not simply make you feel sad. It shifts into a different operating mode entirely. Cacioppo called it hypervigilance. Your threat detection systems activate. Your cortisol levels rise. Your immune system begins to prioritize short-term inflammation over long-term repair. Your sleep architecture fractures. And the part of your brain responsible for reading danger in other people's faces, the part that decides whether a stranger is a friend or a threat, it becomes measurably more sensitive. In other words, loneliness does not just hurt. It makes you worse at the one thing that could fix it, connecting with other people. Think about that for a moment. Your body's response to social isolation is to make social connection harder to achieve. Why would evolution build something so counterproductive? The answer takes you back a very long way. For the vast majority of human history, your ancestors did not live alone. They could not. Survival required a group, a band, a tribe. Anywhere from 20 to 150 people who knew your name, who shared your fire, who would notice if you did not come back from the hunt. Being alone was not a lifestyle choice. Being alone meant dying. Not metaphorically, literally. A single human separated from the group was easy prey. A single human was cold, hungry, and exposed. The group was survival. So your brain evolved to treat loneliness as pain. Real, physical, physiological pain. Not a mood, not a preference. A warning signal as urgent as thirst or hunger. A signal that said, you have been separated from the group. You are in danger. Find your way back. Now. The British anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent years mapping this. His research, published across the 1990s and refined ever since, identified what is now called Dunbar's number, the cognitive limit of stable social relationships a human brain can maintain. The number is 150. That is roughly the size of a Neolithic village, the size of an army company, the size of a functional hunter-gatherer tribe. Your brain was built to hold 150 people inside it, to track their relationships, their moods, their histories, their loyalties. Beyond that number, the system starts to fail. The bonds stop feeling real. The group stops feeling like a group. Now look at a modern city. Millions of people, strangers in every direction, thousands of faces you will never see again. Your brain was not built for this. It was built for a village it will never find. And here is where it gets darker. Because the loneliness epidemic, as it is now being called by public health officials, is not just a Western problem or a social media problem or a problem for introverts. It is a human problem, a species-level problem. In 2023, the United States Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued an advisory declaring loneliness a public health crisis. The numbers behind that declaration are difficult to look at. In a representative survey of adults across the country, over half reported measurable levels of loneliness. Not occasional sadness, not a rough week, chronic, sustained social disconnection. In the United Kingdom, the government created an entire ministry dedicated to it. The Minister for Loneliness. That title would have been unthinkable 50 years ago. Now it exists because the data demanded it. But why now? What changed? The answer is not one thing. It is a slow accumulation of things, each one small, each one reasonable, each one quietly eroding the conditions that your brain was built to need. You moved for a job, then you moved again. Your neighbor changed, the local pub closed, the church emptied, the community center became a parking lot. You got busier, your friends got busier. The group chat replaced the dinner table, the scroll replaced the walk, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, your nervous system noticed something that your conscious mind kept ignoring. The group is not here. Where is the group? Julianne Holt-Lunstad, a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Brigham Young University, synthesized data across hundreds of studies and millions of participants to calculate the actual mortality risk of loneliness. What she found is one of the most cited and most unsettling statistics in modern medicine. Chronic loneliness increases the risk of early death by 26%. It is more dangerous than obesity. It is comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Not in terms of how it feels, in terms of what it does to your body over time. Your cardiovascular system degrades faster. Your immune system fights harder against imaginary threats and slower against real ones. Your DNA at the cellular level shows accelerated aging in people who report chronic social isolation. The biology is not subtle. The biology is screaming. And yet, for most of the past century, loneliness was treated as a personal failing, a character flaw, something the shy or the awkward brought on themselves, something you fixed by trying harder, being more outgoing, putting yourself out there. The advice was always individual. The assumption was always that the problem was you. The science says something completely different. The science says the problem is the environment. That you placed a nervous system built for a Pleistocene village inside a 21st century city and told it to adapt. And it tried. It is still trying. But there are limits to what adaptation can do in one lifetime or even in 10 generations when the environment has changed this fast. Here is the part that most people do not expect. The cure is also not what you think it is. It is not adding more social interactions. It is not downloading another app. Cacioppo's research showed something specific and important. What matters is not the quantity of social contact. It is the quality. More precisely, it is the feeling of being known. You can be in a room full of people, and your brain can still register isolation. You can have hundreds of followers, and your nervous system can still sound the alarm. What silences the alarm is something older and more specific. It is the experience of being seen, of having someone understand not just what you said, but what you meant, of being inside a relationship where the other person has a real model of who you are. That is what a tribe provided, not proximity, not numbers, recognition, the experience of existing inside another person's understanding of the world. That is what your brain is scanning for, constantly, beneath every conversation and every scroll and every message you send. And it is startlingly rare now. Not because people are bad, not because the technology is evil, but because the structures that used to produce it naturally have quietly fallen apart. The shared meals, the long, unscheduled time, the repeated low-stakes contact that slowly builds the kind of knowledge of another person that the brain registers as safety. This is recoverable. That matters. Cacioppo was clear about this. The brain's hypervigilance in response to loneliness is a temporary state. It is a warning, not a sentence. When the conditions change, when real connection returns, the alarm turns off. The inflammation decreases, the cortisol drops, the sleep improves. The brain returns to something closer to its baseline. But you have to know what you are actually looking for. Not stimulation, not distraction, not the feeling of being liked, the feeling of being known. Tonight, you might feel it. That quiet hum underneath the noise. The sense that something is missing that you cannot quite name. Your ancestors would have known immediately what it was. They would have moved toward the fire, toward the voices, toward the group that meant they would survive another night. Your brain is giving you the same signal. The fire is just harder to find now, but it is still out there, and your body has never stopped looking for it.